Protests over the Israel-Hamas war are continuing to disrupt numerous universities across the U.S. Today, police clashed with protesters at the University of Wisconsin's Madison campus, while demonstrators at Fordham University's Lincoln Center campus launched an indoor encampment. And UCLA canceled all classes after violence erupted there overnight. A pro-Palestinian encampment remains intact on that campus. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano is in New York City. Lilia, it's good to see you. Hundreds of protesters in New York have now been arrested. What's the latest you're seeing and hearing there?
Yeah, there were almost 300 protesters arrested last night between the Columbia campus. Most of the people arrested were those who were manifesting inside the university, people who had been taken over the Hamilton Hall, which is this building right behind me, several days ago, a couple of days ago. There were about 109 people who were arrested. I heard from protesters who said when NYPD showed up, they used the sledgehammers to get into the building, into the structure. They were able to get everybody out. They gave students and those otherwise in the campus an opportunity to walk away. The ones that resisted were then taken into city buses. They were cuffed with zip ties, processed. Later on, as we were covering this protest here and weren't able to get access into the university because police had done a whole barricade around several of these blocks, we heard that there was another protest. So we walked all the way uptown to the next protest, which was the City College of New York. And there, at the City College, which is a CUNY campus, there were even more people gathered outside of the university. There were a lot of those people who were arrested there. And finally, police breached that gate, which had been shut, and cleared another encampment. The total people who were arrested there were 173 people. So that sums up to those 300 or so, or nearly 300 protesters. We are hearing from the students here that showed up to manifest here and from many of the faculty that they oppose the bringing police into campus. They said that they had been protesting peacefully and that they had not reached an agreement with the school administration, with the president of the university, and that they denounced the fact that ultimately after that impasse, they were forced to move their encampment or that police would be called. And in fact, eventually after the taking over of this building, police were called in. So there's been a lot of debate and pointing fingers and people calling on the university president to show up to be held accountable for something that many of the protesters here say is their freedom of speech. Others say, look, it was done, including the university president, for the safety of the students and after things got out of hand. The mayor of New York, Eric Adams, had pointed the finger at outside agitators. He quoted that to say that the way that the protests here escalated was because of outside forces or other people outside. I asked students and faculty members, and they said, look, that's a way to discredit our legitimate protests that began 2 weeks ago, actually months ago, here on campus, and that they say had been peaceful. But of course, we've also been covering concerns over hateful speech or anti-Semitism. We're going to have much more of our coverage from here and other campuses across the university on Evening News.
Lilia Luciano with that very thorough wrap-up. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let's bring in our panel, Sabrina Siddiqui and Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey. Sabrina is a national politics reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and Nii-Quartelai is a professor at Pepperdine University and the host of the political radio show A More Perfect Union. He's also working on an upcoming book about Vice President Kamala Harris. Good day to both of you. Thanks for being here. Obviously, a lot to talk about when it comes to these protests and specifically how the administration is talking about them, not talking about them. We certainly don't see the president out in public talking about them essentially at all.
I mean, we're certainly not hearing nearly enough from the White House. I mean, we heard from Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff just this afternoon. And what he said, was what a lot of fair-minded people are thinking, which is, look, we should be able to protect freedom to protest peacefully, freedom to assemble peacefully on campuses. But when we allow counter-protesters to launch terrible epitaphs at student protesters, to literally launch pyrotechnics, to throw them into encampments. We can't allow that to happen. And so, we need more folks in positions of leadership to say that louder. And there's no louder bully pulpit than the President of the United States.
There really isn't. So what's the strategy here? Why aren't we hearing more from him?
I've talked a lot to White House officials about this, and this is a very complex issue, of course, that they've been grappling with, because on the one hand, you've seen the spread of these campus protests across the country, and the story has become more about the protests themselves. University leaders in many of these cases have responded in a very heavy-handed way, dispatching law enforcement, arresting hundreds of students and faculty members who are there trying to help protect the students who are protesting. On the other hand, what these protests are doing is they're once again putting at the center of national discourse the war, the Israel-Hamas war and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and specifically the administration's handling of the war. Because, these students are not only calling on universities to divest, from any business ties that they have with Israeli companies or the Israeli government. They're also calling for a ceasefire. They're also calling for an end to U.S. aid to Israel. So I think one of the challenges here is the president has tried to, be a little bit more empathetic to the, Palestinian side of this conflict in recent weeks or months, especially as he's come under criticism for, the situation on the ground in Gaza and maybe not saying enough, not doing enough. But at the same time, I think they don't want to appear as though they're siding with the cause at hand, since there's no shift in policy here.
Right. They're not willing to cut off military aid. They're not willing to do most of the things that these protesters want them to do.
They're not. And there's been cases where they've condemned, some incidents of anti-Semitism, but I think some of these protesters also want to see them equally condemn when the protesters themselves have been attacked. If there's been anti-Palestinian or Islamophobic rhetoric, they haven't maybe been as outspoken about those incidents. So, this really is also fundamentally, about free speech. And so I think, at some point we would expect to hear the president come out and I think speak amid all this unrest that you're seeing across the country, even though most of these protests, it's worth underscoring, are peaceful.
Clearly, a lot of these universities don't know how to handle this either. And you see different colleges and universities sort of taking different approaches to try to figure out what, if anything, works.
Yeah, certainly we've seen examples of, what to do from universities like Northwestern, like Brown University, who actually said, we're going to have a conversation with student protesters and we're going to reach an agreement that is going to have some enforcement mechanism in that agreement, but is going to help tamp down, bring the temperature down on these campuses. Look, there's a rich tradition of student protests on college campuses across the country. I don't think anybody should dispute that or try to limit that. But when there is violence that erupts, when you have counter protesters that are baiting lawful, peaceful protesters into a fight, that's a problem. And so, my alma mater, the University of Southern California, hasn't quite got this right. It has been trying to find its footing after banning a young Muslim woman, from delivering the commencement address as a valedictorian. And what's so strange is, she was one of 100 of the top students. She went through a process by which she was selected. She happened to be a biomedical engineering major and had a minor in resistance to genocide. That's the degree that she got from the University of Southern California. But then all of a sudden, they weren't having her as a commencement speaker. And the explanation for that has left people baffled. They're calling it a security concern.
Right.
But this is a university that's hosted President Obama and, much more sort of divisive.
And they haven't said
figures.
what the concern is, right?
Absolutely not. And so the University of Southern California, my alma mater, love the Trojans, but, haven't quite got this right. But
Right.
Brown University, Northwestern are examples of what it looks to get it right. And the one thing I would also add is that the University of California president has called for an independent investigation as to what happened at UCLA in terms of the planning on the university's part, what actually transpired between protesters and counter-protesters, and the response from law enforcement. And so these are examples of leadership that are really models for the country at a time where, a lot of folks are looking for leadership.
I just want to say a couple of weeks ago when this began at Columbia University, you had one of the first kind of major student encampments. It was a peaceful demonstration. There are also so many Jewish students, by the way, who are participating in these protests too. They were having Seder together. Passover celebrations were taking place at these encampments. And that's when Columbia, because they didn't disperse, called the New York Police Department, and they arrested more than 100 students. That's when you saw some of the escalation happen with people coming in from outside of the university. And also that's when you saw many of these other encampments spreading across the country in solidarity with these students. So it kind of shows that if you take this heavy-handed approach and you don't talk to the students, the escalation is actually coming from the universities themselves, not the protesters.
Right. Some of these clashes really overshadowing what is a very important issue. Sabrina Siddiqui, Nii-Quartelai Quartey, thanks to both of you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.